And, Sheriff, I will engage my word to you, that I will buy. Tomorrow dinner time, send him to answer thee, or any man. For anything he shall be charged withal. Henry IV. Part 1. When the several byplays, as they may be termed, had taken place among the individuals of the Woodbourne family, as we have intimated in the preceding chapter, the breakfast party at length assembled, Dandy excepted, who had consulted his taste in viands, and perhaps in society, by partaking of a cup of tea with Mrs. Allen, just laced with 2 teaspoonfuls of cognac, and reinforced with various slices from a huge round of beef. He had a kind of feeling that he could eat twice as much, and speak twice as much, with this good Damon Barnes, as with the grand folk in the parlor. Indeed, the meal of this less distinguished party was much more mirthful than that in the higher circle, where there was an obvious air of constraint on the greater part of the assistants. Julia dared not raise her voice in asking Bertram if he chose another cup of tea. Bertram felt embarrassed while eating his toast and butter under the eye of Mannering. Lucy, while she indulged to the uttermost her affection for her recovered brother, began to think of the quarrel betwixt him and Hazelwood. The Colonel felt the painful anxiety natural to a proud mind, when it deems its slightest action subject for a moment to the watchful construction of others. The lawyer, while sedulously buttering his roll, had an aspect of unwonted gravity, arising, perhaps, from the severity of his morning studies. As for the Dominie, his state of mind was ecstatic. He looked at Bertram, he looked at Lucy, he whimpered, he sniggled, he grinned, he committed all manner of solecisms in point of form, poured the whole cream, no unlucky mistake, upon the plate of porridge, which was his own usual breakfast, threw the slops of what he called his crowning dish of tea into the sugar dish instead of the slop basin, and concluded with spilling the scalding liquor upon old Plato, the Colonel's favorite spaniel, who received the libation with a howl that did little honor to his philosophy. The Colonel's equanimity was rather shaken by this last blunder. "Upon my word, my good friend, Mr. Sampson, you forget the difference between Plato and Xenocrates. The former was chief of the academics, the latter of the Stoics," said the Dominie, with some scorn of the supposition. "Yes, my dear sir, but it was Xenocrates, not Plato, who denied that pain was an evil." "I should have thought," said Plato, "that very respectable quadruped, which is just now limping out of the room upon 3 of his 4 legs, was rather of the Cynic school." Very well hit off, but here comes an answer from Macmorland. It was unfavorable. Mrs. Macmorland sent her respectful compliments, and her husband had been, and was, detained, by some alarming disturbances which had taken place the preceding night at Portonferry, and the necessary investigation which they had occasioned. "What's to be done now, counsellor?" said the Colonel to Playdell. "Why, I wish we could have seen Macmorland," said the counsellor, who was a sensible fellow himself, and would besides have acted under my advice. "But there is little harm. Our friend here must be made sui juris. He is at present an escaped prisoner. The law has an awkward claim upon him. He must be placed rectus in curia, that is the first object. For which purpose, Colonel, I will accompany you in your carriage down to Hazelwood House. The distance is not great, we will offer our bail, and I am confident I can easily show Mr. I beg his pardon, Sir Robert Hazelwood, the necessity of receiving it." "With all my heart," said the Colonel, and, ringing the bell, gave the necessary orders. "And what is next to be done?" "We must get hold of Macmorland, and look out for more proof." "Proof," said the Colonel, "the thing is as clear as daylight. Here are Mr. Sampson and Miss Bertram, and you yourself, at once recognized the young gentleman as his father's image, and he himself recollects all the very peculiar circumstances preceding his leaving this country. What else is necessary to conviction?" "To moral conviction nothing more, perhaps," said the experienced lawyer, "but for legal proof a great deal. Mr. Bertram's recollections are his own recollections merely, and therefore are not evidence in his own favor. Miss Bertram, the learned Mr. Sampson, and I, can only say, what everyone who knew the late Ellangowan will readily agree in, that this gentleman is his very picture, but that will not make him Ellangowan's son, and give him the estate. And what will do so? Said the colonel. Why, we must have a distinct probation. There are these gypsies, but then, alas! They are almost infamous in the eye of law, scarce capable of bearing evidence, and Meg Merrilies utterly so, by the various accounts which she formerly gave of the matter, and her impudent denial of all knowledge of the fact when I myself examined her respecting it. What must be done then? Asked Mannering. We must try, answered the legal sage, what proof can be got at in Holland, among the persons by whom our young friend was educated, but then the fear of being called in question for the murder of the gauger may make them silent, or if they speak, they are either foreigners, or outlawed smugglers. In short, I see doubts. Under favour, most learned and honoured sir, said the Dominie, I trust he, who hath restored little Harry Bertram to his friends, will not leave his own work imperfect. I trust so too, Mr. Sampson, said Pleydell, but we must use the means, and I am afraid we shall have more difficulty in procuring them than I at first thought, but a faint heart never won a fair lady, and, by the way, apart to Miss Mannering, while Bertram was engaged with his sister, there's a vindication of Holland for you. What smart fellows do you think Leyden and Utrecht must send forth, when such a very genteel and handsome young man comes from the paltry schools of Middelburg? Of a verity, said the Dominie, jealous of the reputation of the Dutch seminary, of a verity, Mr. Pleydell, but I make it known to you that I myself laid the foundation of his education. True, my dear Dominie, answered the advocate, that accounts for his proficiency in the graces, without question, but here comes your carriage, Colonel. Adieu, young folks, Miss Julia, keep your heart till I come back again, let there be nothing done to prejudice my right, whilst I am non volens adjura. Their reception at Hazelwood House was more cold and formal than usual, for in general the baronet expressed great respect for Colonel Mannering, and Mr. Pleydell, besides being a man of good family and of high general estimation, was Sir Robert's old friend. But now he seemed dry and embarrassed in his manner. He would willingly, he said, receive bail, notwithstanding that the offence had been directly perpetrated, committed, and done, against young Hazelwood of Hazelwood, but the young man had given himself a fictitious description, and was altogether that sort of person, who should not be liberated, discharged, or let loose upon society, and therefore. I hope, Sir Robert Hazelwood, said the Colonel, you do not mean to doubt my word, when I assure you that he served under me as a cadet in India? By no means or account whatsoever. But you call him a cadet, now he says, avers, and upholds, that he was a captain, or held a troop in your regiment. He was promoted since I gave up the command. But you must have heard of it? No. I returned on account of family circumstances from India, and have not since been solicitous to hear particular news from the regiment. The name of Brown, too, is so common, that I might have seen his promotion in the Gazette without noticing it. But a day or two will bring letters from his commanding officer. But I am told and informed, Mr. Pleydell, answered Sir Robert, still hesitating, that he does not mean to abide by this name of Brown, but is to set up a claim to the estate of Ellangowan, under the name of Bertram. Aye, who says that? Said the counsellor. Or, demanded the soldier, whoever says so, does that give a right to keep him in prison? Hush, Colonel, said the lawyer, I am sure you would not, any more than I, countenance him, if he prove an impostor. And, among friends, who informed you of this, Sir Robert? Why, a person, Mr. Pleydell, answered the baronet, who was peculiarly interested in investigating, sifting, and clearing out this business to the bottom. You will excuse my being more particular. Oh, certainly, replied Pleydell. Well, and he says. He says that it is whispered about among tinkers, gypsies, and other idle persons, that there is such a plan as I mentioned to you, and that this young man, who is a bastard or natural son of the late Ellangowan, is pitched upon as the impostor, from his strong family likeness. And was there such a natural son, Sir Robert? Demanded the counsellor. Oh, certainly, to my own positive knowledge. Ellangowan had him placed as cabin boy or powder monkey on board an armed sloop or yacht belonging to the revenue, through the interest of the late Commissioner Bertram, a kinsman of his own. Well, Sir Robert, said the lawyer, taking the word out of the mouth of the impatient soldier, you have told me news. I shall investigate them, and if I find them true, certainly Colonel Mannering and I will not countenance this young man. In the meanwhile, as we are all willing to make him forthcoming, to answer all complaints against him, I do assure you, you will act most illegally, and incur heavy responsibility, if you refuse our bail. Why, Mr. Playdell, said Sir Robert, who knew the high authority of the counsellor's opinion, as you must know best, and as you promised to give up this young man? If he proves an impostor, replied the lawyer, with some emphasis. Certainly, under that condition I will take your bail, though I must say, an obliging, well-disposed, and civil neighbor of mine, who was himself bred to the law, gave me a hint or caution this morning against doing so. It was from him I learned that this youth was liberated and had come abroad, or rather had broken prison, but where shall we find one to draw the bail bond? Here, said the counsellor, applying himself to the bell, send up my clerk, Mr. Driver, it will not do my character harm if I dictate the needful myself. It was written accordingly and signed, and, the justice having subscribed a regular warrant for Bertram alias Brown's discharge, the visitors took their leave. Each threw himself into his own corner of the post-chariot, and said nothing for some time. The colonel first broke silence. So you intend to give up this poor young fellow at the first brush? Who, replied the counsellor, I will not give up one hair of his head, though I should follow them to the court of last resort in his behalf, but what signified mooting points and showing one's hand to that old ass? Much better he should report to his prompter, Glosson, that we are indifferent or lukewarm in the matter. Besides, I wish to have a peep at the enemy's game. Indeed, said the soldier. Then I see there are stratagems in law as well as war. Well, and how do you like their line of battle? Ingenious, said Mr. Playdell, but I think desperate. They are finessing too much, a common fault on such occasions. During this discourse the carriage rolled rapidly towards Woodbourne without anything occurring worthy of the reader's notice, excepting their meeting with young Hazelwood, to whom the colonel told the extraordinary history of Bertram's reappearance, which he heard with high delight, and then rode on before to pay Miss Bertram his compliments on an event so happy and so unexpected. We return to the party at Woodbourne. After the departure of Mannering, the conversation related chiefly to the fortunes of the Ellangowan family, their domains, and their former power. It was, then, under the towers of my fathers, said Bertram, that I landed some days since, in circumstances much resembling those of a vagabond? Its mouldering turrets and darksome arches even then awakened thoughts of the deepest interest, and recollections which I was unable to decipher. I will now visit them again with other feelings, and, I trust, other and better hopes. Do not go there now, said his sister. The house of our ancestors is at present the habitation of a wretch as insidious as dangerous, whose arts and villainy accomplished the ruin and broke the heart of our unhappy father. You increase my anxiety, replied her brother, to confront this miscreant. Even in the den he has constructed for himself, I think I have seen him. But you must consider, said Julia, that you are now left under Lucy's guard and mine, and are responsible to us for all your motions. Consider I have not been a lawyer's mistress 12 hours for nothing, and I assure you it would be madness to attempt to go to Ellangowan just now. The utmost to which I can consent is, that we shall walk in a body to the head of the Woodbourne Avenue, and from that perhaps we may indulge you with our company as far as a rising ground in the common, whence your eyes may be blessed with a distant prospect of those gloomy towers, which struck so strongly your sympathetic imagination. The party was speedily agreed upon, and the ladies, having taken their cloaks, followed the route proposed, under the escort of Captain Bertram. It was a pleasant winter morning, and the cool breeze served only to freshen, not to chill, the fair walkers. A secret though unacknowledged bond of kindness combined the two ladies, and Bertram, now hearing the interesting accounts of his own family, now communicating his adventures in Europe and in India, repaid the pleasure which he received. Lucy felt proud of her brother, as well from the bold and manly turn of his sentiments, as from the dangers he had encountered, and the spirit with which he had surmounted them. And Julia, while she pondered on her father's words, could not help entertaining hopes that the independent spirit which had seemed to her father presumption in the humble and plebeian Brown, would have the grace of courage, noble bearing, and high blood, in the far-descended heir of Ellangowan. They reached at length the little eminence or knoll upon the highest part of the common, called Gibbie's Knowe, a spot repeatedly mentioned in this history, as being on the skirts of the Ellangowan estate. It commanded a fair variety of hill and dale, bordered with natural woods, whose naked boughs at this season relieved the general color of the landscape with a dark purple hue, while in other places the prospect was more formally intersected by lines of plantation, where the Scotch firs displayed their variety of dusky green. At the distance of 2 or 3 miles lay the Bay of Ellangowan, its waves rippling under the influence of the western breeze. The towers of the ruined castle, seen high over every object in the neighborhood, received a brighter coloring from the wintry sun. "There," said Lucy Bertram, pointing them out in the distance, "there is the seat of our ancestors. God knows, my dear brother, I do not covet in your behalf the extensive power which the lords of these ruins are said to have possessed so long, and sometimes to have used so ill. But, oh that I might see you in possession of such relics of their fortune as should give you an honorable independence, and enable you to stretch your hand for the protection of the old and destitute dependents of our family, whom our poor father's death." "True, my dearest Lucy," answered the young heir of Ellangowan, "and I trust, with the assistance of Heaven, which has so far guided us, and with that of these good friends, whom their own generous hearts have interested in my behalf, such a consummation of my hard adventures is now not unlikely. But as a soldier, I must look with some interest upon that worm-eaten hold of Ragged Stone, and if this undermining scoundrel, who is now in possession, dare to displace a pebble of it." He was here interrupted by Dinmont, who came hastily after them up the road, unseen till he was near the party. "Captain, Captain. Yuri wanted by her ye ken o. And immediately Meg Merrilees, as if emerging out of the earth, ascended from the holloway, and stood before them. "I sought ye at the house," she said, "and found but him," pointing to Dinmont, "but ye are right, and I was wrang. It is here we should meet, on this very spot, where my eyes last saw your father. Remember your promise, and follow me." Chapter 53. To hail the king in seemly sort the lady was full fain. But King Arthur, all sore amazed, no answer made again. "What wight art thou," the lady said, "that will not speak to me?" "Sir, I may chance to ease thy pain, though I be foul to see." The marriage of Sir Gawain. The fairy bride of Sir Gawain, while under the influence of the spell of her wicked stepmother, was more decrepit probably, and what is commonly called more ugly, than Meg Merrilees, but I doubt if she possessed that wild sublimity which an excited imagination communicated to features, marked and expressive in their own peculiar character, and to the gestures of a form, which, her sex considered, might be termed gigantic. Accordingly, the Knights of the Round Table did not recoil with more terror from the apparition of the loathly lady placed between an oak and a green holly, than Lucy Bertram and Julia Mannering did from the appearance of this Galwegian Sibyl upon the common of Ellangowan. "For God's sake," said Julia, pulling out her purse, "give that dreadful woman something, and bid her go away." "I cannot," said Bertram, "I must not offend her." "What keeps you here?" said Meg, exalting the harsh and rough tones of her hollow voice. "Why do you not follow? Must your hour call you twice? Do you remember your oath?" Were it at kirk or market, wedding or burial, and she held high her skinny forefinger in a menacing attitude. Bertram turned round to his terrified companions. "Excuse me for a moment, I am engaged by a promise to follow this woman." "Good heavens! Engaged to a madwoman," said Julia. "Or to a gypsy, who has her band in the wood ready to murder you," said Lucy. "That was not spoken like a bairn of Ellangowan," said Meg, frowning upon Miss Bertram. "It is the ill-doers are ill-dreaders." "In short, I must go," said Bertram, "it is absolutely necessary." "Wait for me 5 minutes on this spot." 5 minutes, said the gypsy, 5 hours may not bring you here again. "Do you hear that?" said Julia. "For heaven's sake, do not go." I must, Mr. Dinmont will protect you back to the house." "No," said Meg, "he must come with you, it is for that he is here. He maun take part wi' hand and heart, and will his part it is, for redding his quarrel might have cost you dear." "Troth, Lucky, it's very true," said the steady farmer, "and ere I turn back frae the captain's side, I'll show that I haena forgotten't." "Oh yes," exclaimed both the ladies at once, "let Mr. Dinmont go with you, if go you must, on this strange summons." "Indeed I must," answered Bertram, "but you see I am safely guarded. Adieu for a short time, go home as fast as you can." He pressed his sister's hand, and took a yet more affectionate farewell of Julia with his eyes. Almost stupefied with surprise and fear, the young ladies watched with anxious looks the course of Bertram, his companion, and their extraordinary guide. Her tall figure moved across the wintry heath with steps so swift, so long, and so steady, that she appeared rather to glide than to walk. Bertram and Dinmont, both tall men, apparently scarce equalled her in height, owing to her longer dress and high headgear. She proceeded straight across the common, without turning aside to the winding path, by which passengers avoided the inequalities and little rills that traversed it in different directions. Thus the diminishing figures often disappeared from the eye, as they dived into such broken ground, and again ascended to sight when they were past the hollow. There was something frightful and unearthly, as it were, in the rapid and undeviating course which she pursued, undeterred by any of the impediments which usually incline a traveler from the direct path. Her way was as straight, and nearly as swift, as that of a bird through the air. At length they reached those thickets of natural wood which extended from the skirts of the common towards the glades and brook of Derncleugh, and were there lost to the view. "This is very extraordinary," said Lucy after a pause, and turning round to her companion, "what can he have to do with that old hag?" "It is very frightful," answered Julia, "and almost reminds me of the tales of sorceresses, witches, and evil genii, which I have heard in India. They believe therein a fascination of the eye, by which those who possess it control the will and dictate the motions of their victims. What can your brother have in common with that fearful woman, that he should leave us, obviously against his will, to attend to her commands?" "At least," said Lucy, "we may hold him safe from harm, for she would never have summoned that faithful creature Dinmont, of whose strength, courage, and steadiness Henry said so much, to attend upon an expedition where she projected evil to the person of his friend. And now let us go back to the house till the Colonel returns. Perhaps Bertram may be back first. At any rate, the Colonel will judge what is to be done." Leaning then upon each other's arm, but yet occasionally stumbling, between fear and the disorder of their nerves, they at length reached the head of the avenue, when they heard the tread of a horse behind. They started, for their ears were awake to every sound, and beheld to their great pleasure young Hazelwood. "The Colonel will be here immediately," he said. I galloped on before to pay my respects to Miss Bertram, with the sincerest congratulations upon the joyful event which has taken place in her family. I long to be introduced to Captain Bertram, and to thank him for the well-deserved lesson he gave to my rashness and indiscretion. "He has left us just now," said Lucy, "and in a manner that has frightened us very much." Just at that moment the Colonel's carriage drove up, and, on observing the ladies, stopped, while Mannering and his learned counsel alighted and joined them. They instantly communicated the new cause of alarm. "Meg Merrilees again," said the colonel. "She certainly is a most mysterious and unaccountable personage, but I think she must have something to impart to Bertram, to which she does not mean we should be privy." "The devil take the bedlamite old woman," said the counsellor. "Will she not let things take their course, prop de leg, but must always be putting in her or in her own way? Then, I fear from the direction they took they are going upon the Ellangowan estate, that rascal Glosson has shown us what ruffians he has at his disposal. I wish honest Liddesdale may be guard sufficient." "If you please," said Hazelwood, "I shall be most happy to ride in the direction which they have taken. I am so well known in the country, that I scarce think any outrage will be offered in my presence, and I shall keep at such a cautious distance as not to appear to watch Meg, or interrupt any communication which she may make." "Upon my word," said Pleydell, aside, to be a sprig, whom I remember with a whey face and a satchel not so very many years ago, "I think young Hazelwood grows a fine fellow. I am more afraid of a new attempt at legal oppression than at open violence, and from that this young man's presence would deter both Glosson and his understrappers to hie away. Then, my boy, peer out, you'll find them somewhere about Derncleugh, or very probably in Warwickwood." Hazelwood turned his horse. "Come back to us to dinner, Hazelwood," cried the colonel. He bowed, spurred his horse, and galloped off. We now return to Bertram and Dinmont, who continued to follow their mysterious guide through the woods and dingles, between the open common and the ruined hamlet of Derncleugh. As she led the way, she never looked back upon her followers, unless to chide them for loitering, though the sweat, in spite of the season, poured from their brows. At other times she spoke to herself in such broken expressions as these: "It is to rebuild the old house, it is to lay the cornerstone, and did I not warn him? I tell him I was born to do it. If my father's head had been the stepping stane, let alone his. I was doomed, still I kept my purpose in the cage and in the stocks. I was banished, I kept it in an unco land. I was scourged, I was branded, my resolution lay deeper than scourge or red iron could reach, and now the hour is come." "Captain," said Dinmont, in a half-whisper, "I wish she'd been uncanny. Mad, her words dinna seem to come in God's name, or like other folks. Odd, they threep, declare, in our country that there are sick things." "Don't be afraid, my friend," whispered Bertram in return. "Feared? Fie and a hate, not a wit. Care I," said the dauntless farmer, "be she witch or devil, it's a ain to Dandy Dinmont." "Haud your peace, Goodman," said Meg, looking sternly over her shoulder. "Is this a time or place for you to speak, think ye?" "But, my good friend," said Bertram, "as I have no doubt in your good faith, or kindness, which I have experienced, you should in return have some confidence in me. I wish to know where you are leading us." "There's but a answer to that, Henry Bertram," said the Sibyl. "I swore my tongue should never tell, but I never said my finger should never show. Go on and meet your fortune, or turn back and lose it, that's I hate to say." "Go on then," answered Bertram, "I will ask no more questions." They descended into the glen about the same place where Meg had formerly parted from Bertram. She paused an instant beneath the tall rock where he had witnessed the burial of a dead body, and stamped upon the ground, which, notwithstanding all the care that had been taken, showed vestiges of having been recently moved. "Here rests Ane," she said, "he'll maybe hae neebors soon." She then moved up the brook until she came to the ruined hamlet, where, pausing with a look of peculiar and softened interest before one of the gables which was still standing, she said in a tone less abrupt, though as solemn as before, "Do you see that blacked and broken end of a shaling? Hut, there my kettle boiled for 40 years, there I bore 12 birdly sons and daughters. Where are they now? Where are the leaves that were on that old ash tree at Martinmas? The west wind has made it bare, and I'm stripped too. Do you see that saw tree? It's but a black and rotten stump now. I've sat under it mony a bonny summer afternoon, when it hung its gay garlands o'er the poppling watered. I've sat there, and, elevating her voice, I've held you on my knee, Henry Bertram, and sung ye sangs of the old barons and their bloody wars. It will ne'er be green again, and Meg Merrilees will never sing sangs mair, be they blithe or sad. But ye'll no forget her, and ye'll gar big up, cause to be built up. The auld was for her sake, and let somebody live there that's our good to fear them of another world, for if ever the dead came back amang the living, I'll be seen in this glen mony at night after these crazed banes are in the mould. The mixture of insanity and wild pathos with which she spoke these last words, with her right arm, bare and extended, her left bent and shrouded beneath the dark red drapery of her mantle, might have been a study worthy of our Siddons herself. And now, she said, resuming at once the short, stern, and hasty tone which was most ordinary to her, let us to the wark, let us to the wark. She then led the way to the promontory on which the Kaim of Derncleugh was situated, produced a large key from her pocket, and unlocked the door. The interior of this place was in better order than formerly. "Ye have made things decent," she said. "I may be streaked, stretched out, here or night, there will be few at Meg's likewake, watching over a corpse by night. For mony of our folk will blame what I hae done, and am to do." She then pointed to a table, upon which was some cold meat, arranged with more attention to neatness than could have been expected from Meg's habits. "Eat," she said, "eat, ye'll need it this night yet." Bertram, in complaisance, ate a morsel or two in Dinmont, whose appetite was unabated either by wonder, apprehension, or the meal of the morning, made his usual figure as a trencherman. She then offered each a single glass of spirits, which Bertram drank diluted, and his companion plain. "Will ye taste nathing yourself, Lucky?" said Dinmont. "I shall not need it," replied their mysterious hostess. "And now," she said, "ye maun hae arms, ye maunna gang on dry-handed, but use them not rashly, take captive, but save life, let the law hae its ain, he maun speak ere he die." "Who is to be taken, who is to speak?" said Bertram in astonishment, receiving a pair of pistols which she offered him, and which, upon examining, he found loaded and locked. "The flints are good," she said, "and the powder dry, I ken this wark-wheel." Then, without answering his questions, she armed Dinmont also with a large pistol, and desired them to choose sticks for themselves out of a parcel of very suspicious-looking bludgeons, which she brought from a corner. Bertram took a stout sapling, and Dandy selected a club which might have served Hercules himself. They then left the hut together, and, in doing so, Bertram took an opportunity to whisper to Dinmont, "There's something inexplicable in all this, but we need not use these arms unless we see necessity and lawful occasion. Take care to do as you see me do." Dinmont gave a sagacious nod, and they continued to follow, over wet and over dry, through bog and through fallow, the footsteps of their conductress. She guided them to the wood of Warwick by the same track which the late Ellangowan had used when riding to Derncleugh in quest of his child, on the miserable evening of Kennedy's murder. When Meg Merrilies had attained these groves, through which the wintry sea wind was now whistling hoarse and shrill, she seemed to pause a moment as if to recollect the way. "We maun go the precise track," she said, and continued to go forward, but rather in a zigzag and involved course than according to her former steady and direct line of motion. At length she guided them through the mazes of the wood to a little open glade of about a quarter of an acre, surrounded by trees and bushes, which made a wild and irregular boundary. Even in winter it was a sheltered and snugly sequestered spot, but when arrayed in the verdure of spring, the earth sending forth all its wild flowers, the shrubs spreading their waste of blossom around it, and the weeping birches, which towered over the underwood, drooping their long and leafy fibers to intercept the sun, it must have seemed a place for a youthful poet to study his earliest sonnet, or a pair of lovers to exchange their first mutual avowal of affection. Apparently it now awakened very different recollections. Bertram's brow, when he had looked round the spot, became gloomy and embarrassed. Meg, after uttering to herself, "This is the very spot," looked at him with a ghastly side-glance. "D'ye mind it?" "Yes," answered Bertram, imperfectly, "I do." I pursued his guide. "On this very spot the man fell from his horse. I was behind that bortree bush at the very moment. Sair he strove, and sair he cried for mercy, but he was in the hands of them that never ken the word. Now will I show you the further track. The last time ye travelled it was in these arms." She led them accordingly by a long and winding passage almost overgrown with brushwood, until, without any very perceptible descent, they suddenly found themselves by the seaside. Meg then walked very fast on between the surf and the rocks, until she came to a remarkable fragment of rock detached from the rest. Here, she said in a low and scarcely audible whisper, here the corpse was found. And the cave, said Bertram in the same tone, is close beside it. Are you guiding us there? Yes, said the gypsy in a decided tone. Bend up both your hearts, follow me as I creep in. I have placed the firewood so as to screen you. Bide behind it for a glyph, little, till I say, the hour and the man are baith come, then rin in on him, take his arms, and bind him till the blood burst frae his fingernails. I will, by my soul, said Henry, if he is the man I suppose, Jansen? Aye, Jansen, Haderach, and 20 mere names are his. Dinmont, you must stand by me now, said Bertram, for this fellow is a devil. Ye needna doubt that, said the stout yeoman, but I wish I could mind a bit prayer or I creep after the witch into that hole that she's opening. It wad be a sair thing to leave the blessed sun, and the free air, and gang and be killed, like a tod that's run to earth, in a dungeon like that. But, my sooth, they will be hard-bitten terriers will worry Dandy, so, as I said, deal hae me if I balk you. This was uttered in the lowest tone of voice possible. The entrance was now open. Meg crept in upon her hands and knees. Bertram followed in Dinmont, after giving a rueful glance toward the daylight, whose blessings he was abandoning, brought up the rear.